Not everyone enters war from the surface. Some descend. There is no sound of gunfire to welcome them, no clear moment of transition, just a hole opening in the forest, and the decision to crawl into it. The instant a body slides into the earth, the sky disappears. Not gradually, not emotionally. It is cut away. Light contracts into a circle above, then into a line, then into nothing. Darkness does not rush in violently. It settles. Space collapses inward. The ceiling drops too low to stand upright. The earthen walls are damp, cold, breathing out the smell of rot. There is no direction, no north, no day or night, only inside. Those who are new to the tunnels usually fall silent, not because they are told to, but because they do not know what to say. Voices sound different underground. They do not travel far, they rebound. It feels like speaking into oneself. They learn quickly. Not to breathe too fast, not to cough, not to panic. Panic in a place like this is not just an emotion, it is a biological risk. Air is not infinite. Oxygen is rationed like food. Every breath is a transaction. Some have to turn back on the very first day, not from fear, but because their bodies refuse to adapt. Chests tighten, hands shake, the head spins. The tunnels do not choose the brave, they choose those who can endure. Human beings need a horizon, not to admire it, but to locate themselves in the world. Underground, there is no horizon, only walls of earth, a ceiling of earth, darkness. After a few days, the eyes stop searching far. They learn to look close, very close. Cracks in the soil, drops of water, insects crawling slowly along the walls. Vision adapts, the mind does not. Some begin to dream of the sky, not a specific sky, just an open space without a ceiling. They wake up and strike their heads against earth. Reality returns. On the surface, sound helps people orient themselves. Underground, sound betrays. Every noise travels through the tunnels, its source unclear, its distance unknown. Footsteps could belong to a comrade, or to someone digging from the other side. They learn how to listen, to vibrations, to rhythm, to irregularity. Rats move differently than humans crawl. Earth sounds different from metal. Explosives sound different from tools. Sound becomes the only map. There are moments, if moments can still be called that, when everyone lies still, listening to the earth. The earth has a breathing sound of its own. No one forgets the feeling of insufficient air. Not dramatic suffocation, but gradual reduction. The air grows heavy, hot, wet. Everyone understands if a ventilation shaft collapses, everything ends. No guns required, no bombs, just soil. Once, after heavy rain, a section of tunnel became unnaturally quiet. No one dared enter immediately. Silence underground is never good news. When they finally reached it, there was only collapsed earth, and whatever had been human beyond it was never seen again. There was no body to bury, no name to call. The tunnel does not return what it takes. Confined space changes people, not quickly, but inevitably. Movements shrink, thoughts shorten, emotions compress. All relationships are forced close together. There is no privacy, no retreat. Everyone knows the breathing rhythm of the person beside them, who sleeps poorly, who mutters in dreams, who is close to breaking. Conflict does not explode, it seeps. No shouting, no fighting. Only quiet distance inside a space that does not allow distance. The first death underground does not resemble death on the surface. There is no place to fall, no open space, only a body that stops moving inside a system that must continue functioning. No one screams, no one cries. They do what must be done. The body is moved into a side cavity. Covered. Life continues. Not because they feel nothing, but because there is no room for large emotions. Underground, everything occupies space, even grief. A thought appears early and never leaves. If this tunnel collapses completely, will anyone know we were ever here? There will be no grave, no marker, only earth upon earth. War on the surface is recorded. War underground is not. It unfolds beyond the sight of history, and perhaps that is what makes it most terrifying. Time underground loses its structure. Days are no longer measured by light, but by fatigue, by hunger, by the number of times someone checks their watch, even though the watch no longer means anything. Schedules exist only to prevent collapse of the mind. Eat, rest, move, listen, repeat. The tunnels stretch farther than anyone remembers. They were not built all at once. They were grown, dug slowly, patiently, by hands that learned the shape of soil the way sailors learn the sea. Some passages are wide enough to crouch, others force bodies flat against the ground. There are places where the ceiling presses against the spine and places where sudden height feels unnatural, almost frightening. Every tunnel has a history. Collapses avoided, floods survived, enemies intercepted. The walls remember more than the people do. Those assigned to tunnel duty learn new ways to move. Walking becomes rare. Crawling becomes normal. Knees harden. Elbows bruise permanently. Skin forgets softness. Muscles adapt to confined motion, while others slowly weaken from disuse. Standing upright for too long when it happens feels wrong. Above ground, the body belongs to gravity. Below ground, it belongs to constraint. Light is rationed carefully, not because it is precious, but because it is revealing. Every lamp casts shadows that move unnaturally along the walls, shadows that resemble people, shadows that cause hesitation. Most of the time, they operate in near darkness. Touch replaces sight. Hands slide along dirt walls, memorizing texture. Loose soil means danger. Roots mean proximity to the surface. Wood means structure. Metal means intrusion. They learn to read the tunnel the way others read faces. Smell becomes information. Fresh earth, stagnant air, smoke, oil, sweat. Fear has a scent. So does exhaustion. There is a rule underground that no one officially states, but everyone follows. Never rush. Speed causes mistakes. Mistakes cause collapse. When digging, each movement is slow, controlled, deliberate. Soil is loosened, not torn away. Sound is minimized. Breath is regulated. Sometimes they stop digging not because they are tired, but because the earth sounds wrong. A subtle difference in resistance, a vibration that should not be there. Digging blindly underground is not bravery, it is suicide. Encounters in the tunnels are different from those on the surface. There is no distance, no maneuver. When two sides meet underground, it is sudden, intimate, final. Flashlight beams collide, breathing stops, seconds decide everything. Weapons are small, blades are favored. Gunfire underground is desperation, noise travels, ceilings tremble, air fills with dust. Sometimes both sides retreat without firing a single shot, each knowing that survival depends on restraint. Other times, restraint fails. The aftermath is worse than the encounter itself. Blood has nowhere to go. It darkens the earth, soaks into clothes, lingers in smell. Bodies are harder to remove, harder to forget. After their first underground encounter, many stop sleeping deeply. Dreams become fragmented. Earth pressing down, tunnels narrowing, air disappearing. Some wake up clawing at the walls, convinced they are buried alive. No one mocks them. Everyone understands. There are no heroes underground, only roles. Digger, listener, carrier, guard. Each role exists to keep the system alive. Individual identity erodes. Names become less important than function. On the surface, war tests courage. Underground, it tests sanity. Letters from home lose meaning. Descriptions of sunlight, rain, open fields feel like stories from another species. Some stop reading them. Others read them repeatedly until the images hurt too much. Food tastes different underground. Not worse, just irrelevant. Eating becomes maintenance. Chewing is mechanical, swallowing efficient, pleasure feels inappropriate, laughter feels dangerous. Every emotion is filtered through a single question. Does this help us survive? If the answer is no, it is discarded. Slowly, quietly, something shifts. They stop thinking of the tunnels as temporary, stop imagining an exit. The underground becomes the world, and the surface becomes a rumor, a dangerous one, because hope down here is a liability. And the tunnels do not forgive distraction. Eventually, the tunnels begin to feel intentional. Not safe, never safe, but familiar. The earth stops feeling like an enemy pressing in and more like a presence that must be negotiated with. They learn its moods. After rain, the soil grows impatient. It loosens, it shifts without warning. After heat, it dries and hardens, resisting tools, forcing slower progress. The tunnels are alive in their own way. They expand, they contract, they listen. Those who spend too long underground begin to recognize this intuitively, not intellectually. In the body, a tightening in the chest before a collapse, a pressure behind the eyes before air quality drops, a sense of wrongness that has no language. Commanders on the surface rely on maps. Down here, maps lie. A tunnel that existed yesterday may not exist today. A wall can become a passage can become a grave. So the experienced ones stop trusting paper. They trust memory, touch, sound. They mark the tunnels subtly. A notch in the wood, a scratch in the clay, a piece of string knotted in a specific way. Signs only visible to those who know to look. To outsiders, the tunnels appear chaotic, but there is an order, a logic shaped by survival. The first time someone gets lost underground, it does not look dramatic. There's no sudden disappearance, no scream, just a delay, a few minutes too long. At first, they assume the person's stopped to adjust equipment. Then they assume a wrong turn. By the time fear enters the calculation, it is already late. Searching underground is slow and dangerous. Every additional person increases the risk of collapse. Every call risks revealing positions. Sometimes the lost are found, curled into themselves, breathing shallow, eyes unfocused. Other times, only silence answers. No body, no sound. The tunnels close behind them. No one speaks their name afterward, not out of cruelty, but because names imply permanence. And underground, nothing is permanent. Above ground, war has fronts. Below ground, it has layers. Vertical movement matters more than distance. Digging upward risks detection. Digging downward risks flooding. The most dangerous space is the one in between. There are moments when explosions shake the surface above and soil rains gently from the ceiling. In those moments, everyone freezes. Not because they are afraid of death, but because movement might invite it faster. They wait, sometimes for seconds, sometimes for hours. Waiting becomes a skill. Waiting without imagining collapse, without counting breaths, without thinking about how thin the ceiling really is. Some learn it, others don't. Those who don't eventually volunteer for surface duty or make mistakes. The tunnels change morality. Above ground, killing is an act. Below ground, it is a calculation. If one person cannot move, they slow everyone. If someone panics, they consume air. If someone hesitates, they expose positions. Compassion becomes selective. Not because hearts harden, but because survival demands hierarchy. These choices are never discussed afterward. There is no language for them, only a shared understanding that certain lines were crossed because there was no alternative. The tunnels do not reward reflection. They reward continuation. One night, though night has no meaning here, they hear digging from the other side. Not loud, not frantic, patient, measured. The sound of someone who knows what they are doing. Everyone stops, breath held, lights off. They listen to the rhythm. 3 scrapes, pause. 2 scrapes, pause. It mirrors their own. This is not coincidence. Someone whispers a question without words. Do we intercept or reroute? Intercept means confrontation. Reroute means weeks of labor. They choose reroute. Silently. Earth is moved by hand. Soil carried away in cloth sacks. Progress measured in inches. The sound continues on the other side, unaware. 2 systems adjusting to avoid each other. 2 worlds sharing the same darkness. Later, someone asks, what if they're doing the same thing? No one answers, because the thought is unsettling. It suggests that survival underground does not belong to one side. It belongs to whoever adapts fastest. As time passes, memories of the surface fade unevenly. Some forget faces, others forget places. What remains are sensations: heat, humidity, pressure. The feeling of earth inches from the nose. When someone is finally rotated back to the surface, they emerge blinking. The sky feels obscene in its size. Noise feels violent. Wind feels intrusive. Some drop to their knees, not in gratitude, but in disorientation. The horizon overwhelms them. They feel exposed, naked. The surface, once home, now feels hostile, too open, too loud, too unpredictable. Many ask to return underground. Commanders are surprised, psychologists are not. The tunnels have rewritten the definition of safety. Down there, danger is constant, but it is understood. Up here, danger feels abstract, invisible, and abstraction terrifies those who have learned to survive only what they can touch. Years later, long after the war ends, some will wake up at night convinced the ceiling is too close. They will press their palms against walls, seeking resistance, seeking reassurance. The tunnels will never fully release them, because the war underground does not end with peace. It ends only when the body forgets the shape of the earth, and most never do. There comes a point when even endurance begins to fracture. Not loudly, not all at once. It fractures quietly, in routines. Someone forgets to check a junction they have checked 100 times before. Someone counts heads twice and still gets the number wrong. Someone laughs at nothing, then cannot stop. These are not failures of discipline. They are signals. The tunnels do not forgive accumulation. Fatigue builds like sediment, layer upon layer, invisible until collapse. Those who have been underground the longest start to move differently, slower, more cautiously. Not because they fear the earth, but because they no longer trust themselves. Muscle memory begins to misfire. Hands reach for tools that are not there. Feet hesitate at passages they once navigated without thought. The mind begins to drift. In the tunnels, drifting is dangerous. There are moments when someone stares at the wall too long and begins to see patterns that are not there: faces, openings, movement. The earth plays tricks, or perhaps the mind does, desperate for something other than dirt. Leadership underground is not about authority. It is about stability, the calmest voice, the steadiest breathing, the one who notices change before it becomes disaster. Orders are short, rare. Too many words waste air. When a leader falters, it is felt immediately, not emotionally, physically. Breathing speeds up, movements become erratic, the system reacts. One night, during a routine expansion, the soil gives way. Not a dramatic collapse, just a soft, sudden shift. Enough. A tunnel narrows without warning, then closes. Three people are on the wrong side. Everyone freezes. Shouting is useless. Digging blindly risks killing them faster. They listen. Tapping comes from the other side. Weak, irregular, alive. Calculations begin instantly. Air volume, distance, soil type. Rescue is possible, but not guaranteed. It will take hours, perhaps days. The trapped will have less air, less light, less time. A decision is made. Work begins. Every movement is careful, every sound measured. They dig toward the tapping, then it stops, not abruptly, gradually. One tap becomes two. Two become pauses. Pauses become nothing. They keep digging anyway, because stopping would mean accepting the answer. When the passage finally breaks through, there is only space. Air rushes, dust settles. No bodies. They were moved, buried deeper. The earth rearranged itself. No one speaks, tools are packed away, the tunnel is sealed. There is no ceremony, loss underground has no shape. It is absorbed like blood into soil. After this, something changes. Risk tolerance drops, movements slow further, operations become conservative, survival margins shrink. The tunnels, once expanding, begin to contract. Not physically, strategically. They stop pushing outward, stop seeking advantage. They focus on preservation. This is the beginning of the end, not defeat. Stagnation. A system designed for movement cannot survive stillness. Supplies run low, air systems degrade, ventilation shafts clog, maintenance becomes constant. Every gain is offset by decay. Above ground, negotiations are happening. Talk of ceasefire, withdrawal, endings. Below ground, none of this feels real. Peace is an abstract concept to those who live in Earth. Eventually, the order comes. Gradual evacuation, section by section, controlled, no rush. The tunnels will be abandoned. Some feel relief, others feel panic. Leaving the tunnels feels like betrayal, as if abandoning something that kept them alive, as if the Earth will remember. The last days underground are strange, quiet, not tense, not urgent, reflective. People touch the walls more often, pause in familiar spaces. They do not say goodbye. Goodbyes imply response. The tunnels do not respond. When the final group emerges, they do not look back. There is nothing to see. The entrance is sealed, covered, erased. Rain will fall, roots will grow, time will press down. Within months, there will be no visible trace. Years later, maps will mark the area as ordinary ground. Children will walk over it, animals will burrow through it. No one will know how many lived beneath their feet. The tunnels will collapse slowly, patiently, returning to earth, returning to silence. Those who survive carry it differently. Some speak of it rarely in fragments, others never speak of it at all, but certain things remain: an inability to relax in open spaces, a sensitivity to sound, a discomfort with ceilings that feel too high, and sometimes in quiet rooms they will feel it again: the pressure, the closeness, the certainty that beneath every surface there is another layer, and that human history is not only written in cities and battles, but also in places where no light ever reached, places that held entire lives and then closed over them as if they had never existed at all. After the tunnels are gone, time behaves differently, not immediately. At first, life resumes with an imitation of normality. Meals are eaten under open sky, shoes touch ground without fear of collapse, voices rise above whispers, but the body does not reset on command. The underground lingers in reflexes. Hands still check walls that are not there. Ears still search for vibrations beneath footsteps. Breathing remains shallow, measured, economical. Sunlight feels excessive. It exposes too much. On the surface, everything is visible, and visibility creates vulnerability. Some survivors sleep poorly for years, not because of nightmares, but because of silence. Silence without pressure feels wrong, too empty, too loose. They sleep better near walls, in small rooms, with doors closed. Hospitals notice a pattern. Former tunnel personnel react badly to MRI machines. Elevators, crowded corridors, The body remembers confinement even when the mind insists it is free. Psychologists try to name it. Claustrophobia does not fit, neither does trauma entirely. This is not fear of being trapped, it is fear of being uncontained. Underground, limits were clear. Walls existed, ceilings were felt. On the surface, space has no edges, and that unsettles those who learn to survive by proximity. Reintegration programs fail quietly. Group discussions stall, language falters. How do you explain a place where morality compressed, where survival erased nuance, where death arrived without spectacle? Words feel inflated. Stories lose accuracy the moment they are spoken aloud. Some try anyway. They describe tunnels as dark, as narrow, as dangerous. Listeners nod. But darkness is not what defined the tunnels, nor danger. It was intimacy, being too close to life and death to pretend either was abstract. The survivors notice something else too. On the surface, people argue loudly about things that do not threaten survival: opinions, beliefs, ideals. Underground, none of these mattered, only function did. This creates distance, not anger, not resentment, disconnection. Conversations feel theatrical, emotions exaggerated. They listen but do not engage. Some are mistaken for cold, others for arrogant. In truth, they are simply calibrated differently. The tunnels reset the scale. Years later, when the war becomes history, footnotes mention underground operations, briefly, as tactics, as strategy, numbers without texture. Those who lived there recognize none of it. History smooths edges. The tunnels had none. Occasionally, someone suggests excavating remnants, preserving them, turning them into museums. The survivors oppose it, quietly, not out of secrecy, out of respect. The tunnels were never meant to be seen. They were meant to function, then vanish. Exposure would distort them, fry, turn them into spectacle, and spectacle was the one thing the underground never tolerated. As decades pass, memories thin, faces blur, names fade, but sensations remain stubborn. The smell of damp earth after rain, the sound of distant construction vibrating through ground, the pressure change before a storm. These moments stop them mid-step, bring the tunnels back without warning. They do not talk about these moments. There is no need. Anyone who has been underground knows. Toward the end of their lives, some return to the places above the old tunnels, not to remember, to confirm something. They walk slowly, stand still, listen. They feel nothing, no vibration, no echo, just earth. The tunnels are gone, completely. This brings relief and a strange sadness, because something that once held so much human effort, so much fear, so much endurance has left no mark at all. But perhaps that is the point. The underground war was never about legacy. It was about buying time. Time for others to live above. Time for history to continue elsewhere. Time that cost invisible lives. As they leave these places for the last time, they understand something with clarity. Civilizations remember what rises above ground. They forget what supports them from below. And beneath every peaceful surface, there are layers of forgotten endurance holding it up. Unacknowledged, unseen, still doing their work, even after they're gone. In the final years, memory stops behaving like a line. It becomes a chamber. Some moments echo endlessly. Others disappear without resistance. Those who lived underground find that their past does not fade evenly. They forget birthdays, dates, names of towns, but they remember pressure. They remember the exact sensation of soil inches from the face, the way breath sounded different when shared air thinned, the weight of silence when everyone understood the same danger at once. These memories do not feel old, they feel adjacent, as if the tunnels exist one layer below the present, still intact, still waiting. When death approaches, it does not arrive with fear, not like people expect. There is familiarity in it, the narrowing, the quiet, the reduction of unnecessary movement. Some notice their breathing slow naturally, as if returning to an old discipline. Hospice rooms feel too large, windows too open. They ask for the lights dimmed, curtains drawn, not darkness, containment. Family members misunderstand. They think it is sadness or fear. It is neither. It is alignment. The body remembers where it learned to survive. In the last conversations, the tunnels are rarely mentioned directly. Instead, they talk about practical things: tools, systems, processes. How something works matters more than what it meant. Meaning was never the priority underground, only function. Occasionally, someone will say something that sounds insignificant to others. Make sure it's sealed properly. Check the airflow. Don't leave gaps. These are not metaphors. They are habits that outlive their environment. When the end comes, no struggle, no drama, just a gradual reduction, as if the world gently narrows its focus until only one sensation remains: stillness. Afterward, belongings are sorted, uniforms folded, photographs boxed. Nothing indicates the depth of where they once lived. No medals reference it, no records describe it accurately. History keeps moving forward. New wars are studied, new technologies debated. The underground remains a footnote. Eventually, even that fades. The land above the tunnels changes hands. Forests grow, cities expand, foundations are poured where tunnels once ran. Concrete replaces soil, but the earth remembers pressure. It always does. Occasionally, a building settles unexpectedly. A crack forms where no fault line exists. Engineers attribute it to natural causes. They are not wrong. The ground shifts because it has shifted before. Because long ago, humans carved space inside it and asked it to hold their fear, their breath, their survival. And it did, silently, faithfully, then closed. If the tunnels have a legacy, it is not monuments or stories. It is this: that entire lives can be spent in places no one will ever see. That endurance does not require witnesses. That survival is often quiet, unrecorded, and absolute. Above ground, history celebrates what is visible. Below ground, humanity learned what it truly costs to keep that history going. And even now, long after the last tunnel collapsed, that lesson remains embedded in the earth. Not as a memory, but as pressure. Waiting, as it always has. There is no final chapter to what was buried, only distance. Time moves forward, but it does not erase evenly. It compresses, it redistributes weight. Generations grow up without knowing why certain instincts exist, why some elders insist doors be checked twice, why silence is respected without explanation, why enclosed spaces feel safe to people who should fear them. These habits are inherited without stories. They pass quietly like pressure through layers. Language fails to carry the tunnels forward, but behavior does. A pause before entering darkness, a hand brushing a wall instinctively, a preference for listening before speaking. The underground reshaped the human nervous system more than it reshaped land. That is what remains. Not trauma, calibration. Civilizations often imagine collapse as sudden fire, noise, visibility, but endurance is quieter than destruction. It is repetition without applause, function without meaning. Lives spent maintaining systems so others never notice they exist. The tunnels were not heroic, they were necessary, and necessity rarely asks to be remembered. If someone were to dig deep enough one day, not for war, not for shelter, but for curiosity, they might find nothing. No artifacts, no skeletons, no preserved corridors, just disturbed soil layered back into itself. The absence would feel disappointing, but absence is not emptiness, it is evidence of closure, of something that fulfilled its purpose so completely that it left no excess behind. Above ground, humanity builds to be seen. Below ground, it learned to exist without witnesses. That lesson is uncomfortable. It suggests that much of what matters will never be acknowledged, that survival may require anonymity, that sacrifice may dissolve without recognition, and that history, as it is written, rests on foundations it does not name. The tunnels do not ask to be remembered. They already were, by bodies that adapted, by minds that narrowed and held, by lives that accepted containment so others could expand. What remains now is not the place. It is the understanding that beneath every open horizon there are layers of invisible labor, that silence does not mean absence, and that some of the most important chapters of human endurance were written where no light could reach and then allowed to disappear, as they were always meant to. What disappears completely becomes difficult to question. That is its power. When there is no trace, no ruin, no artifact to point at, the mind stops asking how something was sustained. Comfort grows effortless, stability feels natural. The surface world builds stories around progress, technology, expansion, visibility, but progress rarely explains its own foundations. The tunnels never asked for belief, they asked for compliance. Hands followed routines, bodies adapted to constraint, minds narrowed to what mattered. That shape of thinking does not vanish easily. Even now, long after the last collapse, systems everywhere echo it. Data centers buried underground, emergency protocols built on silence and redundancy, architectures designed to fail quietly rather than publicly. Modern civilization still hides its most vital functions below ground, not because it remembers the tunnels, but because it learned the same lesson independently. What keeps everything alive must not depend on attention. The survivors never framed their experience as wisdom. They distrusted grand conclusions. Underground thinking avoided abstraction. It preferred rules that worked. Breathe slowly. Move deliberately. Do not waste light. Do not waste sound. Do not waste people. These rules migrated. They appear now in places far removed from war, in disaster response, in spacecraft design, in crisis medicine. Anywhere failure is absolute, the logic of the tunnels resurfaces. It is not named, it is felt. And perhaps that is the truest form of inheritance. Not stories passed down, but instincts embedded. Civilizations often believe they are guided by ideas. In reality, they are guided by constraints they have survived before. The underground was one such constraint. It forced humanity to confront a version of itself stripped of narrative. No heroism, no spectacle, no meaning beyond continuity, and continuity was enough. If there is a warning buried in all this, it is not dramatic. It does not predict collapse. It does not threaten extinction. It simply reminds. Systems that keep life going are rarely visible, rarely celebrated, often forgotten. But when they fail, everything above them becomes impossible. The tunnels failed deliberately. They ended when they were no longer needed. That is a luxury most systems never receive. As the world grows louder, brighter, more exposed, the logic of the underground waits quietly, patient, ready to reappear wherever conditions demand it, not as a place, but as a way of thinking. And when it does, few will recognize it as old. They will call it innovation, resilience, adaptation. They will not know they are repeating a pattern carved long ago beneath layers of soil and silence, a pattern that proved once already that humanity can survive without witnesses, and that sometimes the greatest strength is learning how to disappear without collapsing the world above you. Eventually, even patterns lose their origin. What once emerged from necessity becomes habit, then doctrine, then assumption. People begin to believe these systems were inevitable, that they arose naturally, that they were designed cleanly, rationally from theory. They forget that many of them were born in panic, in darkness, in spaces too small for error. The underground taught something uncomfortable, that intelligence does not always expand. Sometimes it contracts, on purpose. It sheds excess, it abandons elegance, it chooses what works over what explains itself. This runs counter to how civilizations like to see themselves. They prefer stories of growth, of enlightenment, of upward movement. The tunnels offered none of that. They offered survival without progress, continuity without improvement, a holding pattern against collapse. And that idea unsettles modern thinking because it implies that the future is not always built. Sometimes it is merely preserved until someone else can build it later. Those who inherit tunnel logic do not announce it. They do not argue loudly. They do not dominate discussion. They wait. They observe. They map dependencies. They identify single points of failure. They understand that most systems do not break at their strongest points, but at the quiet seams no one checks anymore. This makes them seem cautious, sometimes pessimistic. But pessimism is not their motivation. Memory is, even when they cannot articulate it. In moments of crisis, blackouts, disasters, sudden instability, they move first, not toward action, but toward containment. They reduce variables, they establish boundaries, they create small, survivable spaces inside chaos. Others may call this fear, but it is recognition. The same recognition that once kept air flowing in spaces that could not afford mistakes. As time stretches further and direct witnesses disappear entirely, the underground becomes abstract even to those shaped by it. What remains is a feeling that fragility is always closer than it appears, that stability is often borrowed, not owned, that noise and visibility are luxuries. This feeling does not paralyze, it steadies. It produces people who build redundancies where others build confidence, who ask quiet questions when others celebrate certainty, who prepare exits even while entrances are still being decorated. Civilizations rarely honor such people. They prefer architects of monuments, not caretakers of foundations. But when systems strain, when pressure builds invisibly, it is these instincts that surface, uncelebrated, unlabeled, effective. If the underground has a final contribution, it is this inversion, that what saves the future may look like retreat, that intelligence may require narrowing rather than expanding, that disappearing can be an act of protection, and that some of humanity's most durable knowledge was learned not by reaching outward, but by pressing inward, into the earth, into constraint, into silence. and learning how to remain when everything else demanded collapse. At a certain point, even the idea of continuation becomes unnecessary. What remains no longer needs to be extended, it simply persists. The underground was never a destination, it was a compression chamber, a place where excess was stripped away until only function remained. Civilizations tend to confuse visibility with strength. They build upward to prove existence. They record loudly to assert importance. But the underground taught a different arithmetic. That strength can be quiet, that endurance does not announce itself, that survival often depends on remaining unnoticed. This lesson does not age. It does not belong to one war, one generation, one geography. It waits. Whenever systems grow too complex to understand, whenever expansion outpaces stability, whenever noise replaces awareness, the logic returns. Someone suggests reducing scope. Someone else recommends redundancy instead of scale. A third insists on silence where spectacle was planned. These voices are often ignored at first. They always are. But when pressure accumulates, when failure stops being hypothetical, attention shifts. And suddenly, the quiet logic makes sense. Not because it is elegant, but because it works. The underground never promised victory, only survival. And survival extended long enough becomes history. What is forgotten is not the lesson, but its origin. No one remembers where the instinct came from. They only know it feels right. That is how the deepest knowledge travels, not through books, not through monuments, but through bodies responding correctly before the mind has time to argue. The underground did not leave ruins, it left reflexes. It taught humanity how to operate when meaning collapses and only continuity remains. And that knowledge, once learned, cannot be unlearned. It recedes, it hides, it waits. Until the next moment when the world narrows, options disappear, and silence becomes necessary again. Then, without ceremony, without acknowledgement, without memory, the logic resurfaces, and humanity survives not because it remembers the tunnels, but because the tunnels remembered it. What finally ends it is not exhaustion, it is sufficiency. There comes a moment when nothing new needs to be added because everything essential has already been compressed into place. The underground does not conclude with revelation. It does not offer a final insight or moral. It simply stops being required. And that in itself is the resolution. What it produced was never meant to expand forever. It was meant to hold, to stabilize, to buy time. Time for others to live above without knowing why they could. Once that time is secured, the underground recedes completely, not into memory, into irrelevance, which is the highest form of success for any support structure. Civilizations rarely notice what no longer fails. They notice only collapse. But the underground succeeded precisely because it vanished without taking the surface with it. Nothing dramatic marked its completion. No signal, no announcement, just absence. And absence here is not loss, it is completion. Everything that needed to be learned was learned under pressure. Everything that needed to adapt, adapted. Everything that needed to disappear did so. There is nothing left to excavate, nothing left to explain, only a quiet continuity that carries forward without asking to be traced back. This is where the story ends, not because there is nothing more to say, but because saying more would violate its nature. The underground never spoke in excess, and now it does not speak at all.